Excellencies, members of the Oireachtas, distinguished guests, it's just a pleasure for me, first of all, to welcome you on behalf of the All-Party Oireachtas Group on sexual and reproductive health and rights. I'm chair of the group, and I'd like to particularly thank the Irish Family Planning Association, who've done such a huge amount of work in organising this event today. I just want to tell you a little bit about the All-Party Group, and just not to confuse it with the Oireachtas Committee on the Eighth Amendment, although some of us are members of that committee as well as being members of the All-Party Group. But the All-Party Group is a long-established informal interest group within the Oireachtas, and Senator Mary Henry here, who's at the top of the room, was one of the founder members back in the year 2000, along with Mary Benotti and others. The All-Party Group was formed with the purpose of ensuring that sexual and reproductive health and rights, as defined in international human rights treaties, conventions and global agreements, are reflected in Irish government policy, in the overseas aid context and in national health policy. We're motivated by the aim of educating and raising parliamentary awareness of sexual and reproductive health and rights. We're concerned with a range of critical issues, from the global unmet need for contraception, the impact of the Trump administration's global gag rule on the reproductive health services that are so critical to women and girls in developing countries and to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, to the uptake of the HPV vaccine in Ireland and the barriers to access to contraception at home, and not least the topic for today, which is reforming Ireland's abortion laws, drawing on international best practice to develop women-centred healthcare. And I suppose it's a particularly opportune time that we're holding this meeting today, because we're expecting that the report from the Citizens' Assembly will actually be delivered to us this morning at about 11 o'clock. The latest information I have is that we'll have soft copies at 11, and then we'll have hard copies somewhere between 11 and 11:30. So I've asked somebody to actually bring us down some hard copies down here to the meeting, should they arrive before we finish, so hopefully we will have copies later on. For the first time, an Oireachtas committee is tasked with considering how we might reform our laws in Ireland in order to give women access to abortion services, rather than within the restrictive confines of the Constitution as it stands at the moment. As the All-Party Group, we firmly believe that in order to make this process a success, we must look outward. We must hear from international research and standard-setting bodies that have decades of experience in reviewing, evaluating, developing and implementing good reproductive healthcare provision, and learn from the global experience of addressing unintended pregnancy, unsafe abortion, and the provision of good reproductive healthcare, including safe abortion services. We must learn about the policies that we need to put in place to ensure good reproductive healthcare in Ireland. And we must consider, as we do with all other areas where we consider policy reform, the scientific evidence of international research experts, and reflect on how far our current legal and policy framework is from international norms and standards, and how we might bring law and policy closer to good practice. As an all-party group, we very much want to engage in discussion with and hear from the invited experts who are here today. So it's my pleasure now to hand over to Dr. Jen Donnelly of the Rotunda Hospital, who's going to chair the event. Dr. Donnelly.
Thank you very much, John, and thank you very much to the IFPA and to the All-Party Group for inviting me here today to chair this session. I'd just like to give you a quick overview of how the morning will run. First of all, Dr. Henshin will speak about the unmet need for abortion services in Ireland and the experiences of women affected by this denial of care. And then Professor Arul Kumaran will explain the healthcare rationale for providing legal abortion services, international human rights standards and the WHO safe abortion guidelines. And lastly, Dr. Sedge will provide an overview of global abortion trends. As a practicing clinician, I work under the auspices of the Protection of Life during Pregnancy Act. And as you know, it's quite a restrictive act in terms of clinical practice. And it was not designed to meet healthcare standards. It was drafted to give effect to a very limited constitutional right. And therefore, it is very important that if we have the opportunity to create a new law and policy on abortion, that it must be based on international best practice, as Jan O'Sullivan has said. And it must allow for clinical flexibility, as although the law is very clear, best clinical practice is continually evolving, and women and the care of women has got to be at the centre of this and to evolve with best clinical standards.